Tucker Carlson said something on his show, and when I play this for you, you're going to think this must have been a long time ago. This was recently. This was very, very recently, where he pretends like George Floyd wasn't murdered. And he says it's crazy that Derek Chauvin, or the gist of it is it's crazy that Derek Chauvin is being considered a murderer and we're all supposed to pretend that he is when he's not. But quite literally, he is a murderer because he was charged and convicted of it. Of course, a lot of times we use the word murderer in a colloquial sense where we're saying, you know, they killed someone unjustly, they murdered someone, but they haven't actually gone through the criminal justice system and had that litigated. In this case, he very, very literally is a murderer. Derek Chauvin, of course, the person who, the police officer who had his knee on George Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes, I think 9 minutes, and led to the death of George Floyd. Everyone remembers that moment. It's one of those situations where you think, okay, while a lot of times there's disagreement about these stories relating to police killings and is the police officer in the wrong and was it this, that, and the other, this one was pretty unambiguous, and most people admitted right, left, and center that it was absolutely horrible and were pleased with the outcome of the trial. Except Tucker Carlson. On Fox News, I'm about to show you a clip of him with Laura Ingraham. They were discussing, she's doing some on-the-ground reporting of Minneapolis and the effects of the riots that happened in 2020 relating to George Floyd's murder. Of course, that is where that went down. And they're still talking about this. And I'll get to explaining my feelings on rioting and what happened to Minneapolis and what happened to other cities in 2020 after we watch this clip. So don't think that I'm not going to address the point they're trying to make here. And then, of course, he goes off the rails in speaking about Derek Chauvin in the manner that he did. But first, let's just check out the clip, and then I'll further discuss.
Nothing's been done. Shocking.
So they destroy the city. They put this cop in prison for the rest of his life. We all have to pretend he committed murder, which he didn't. But whatever, we have to pretend it. And then they leave, and they move on to the next thing to destroy. So perfect. Laura Ingraham, I appreciate the fact that you're on.
Okay, so we all caught that, right? I'm not losing my mind. He said we are all supposed to pretend that Derek Chauvin is a murderer when he's not. Again, let's set aside the fact that he literally is, according to our judicial system, but just talk about the facts of the situation. We all watched the video where people are screaming for him to get off of George Floyd. It seems completely unnecessary. The crime that George Floyd was supposed to have committed was counterfeit, trying to use counterfeit money, which obviously is a crime, but is definitely not a crime that's worthy of the death penalty at the hands of a police officer. And he was on George Floyd's neck long enough to where George Floyd, as he was shouting, he couldn't breathe, eventually did die. So what Tucker Carlson is trying to do, besides just blatantly disrespecting and disregarding the tragedy that happened that day, is wild. It's really, really wild. And it shows how far right, and I don't even want to say that, because is this even a ideological spectrum thing as far as political policies go? No, this is just unhinged, detached, horrible. And I know people don't like this word and used in most contexts. They think it's just, slandering someone without any evidence. But I think it's fair to say in this situation, there is some racism going on. I don't think in other situations where someone has a police officer kneeling on their neck for 9 minutes and the person dies, Tucker Carlson would come out and say that's not murder. I just don't, but you can disagree with me on that. So yes, I do think there's a big feeling from Tucker Carlson of his audience is more okay with him having this or supportive of him having this stance about George Floyd's death because of that. And that's just super heartbreaking. And again, I just think as far as events that have happened over the last number of years relating to police officers killing individuals and there being a big public discussion about it, I think George Floyd's is pretty unambiguous and pretty clear what happened there. And so watching Tucker Carlson 2 years later, or at least a year and a half later, pretend like that's not the facts of the situation is outrageous. And it shows how dishonest of an individual Tucker Carlson is. Wild stuff. So then I was going to address, as I promised, the whole segment they're trying to do is about how damaged Minneapolis is. And that's the point of their segment. So I just want to say, because a lot of people, I think, do have kind of weird, blurry views on this subject, I am very much against you destroying communities as a form of protest. I really am. That's my stance. It's clear, it's unambiguous, and I think it's correct. Harming the citizens of the city of Minneapolis is not doing anything to, move forward your goals in police reform or racial justice or whatever it is. And so that's clear. That's undeniable. Of course, you can recognize that situations within a country will lead to riots and damage like this. And so you can, while condemning the riots, also want to address the issues that are leading to them. But we should not be encouraging or accepting or condoning that type of protest, because I don't think it is a fair form of protest. I think it's, harmful and damaging, and you're hurting people, citizens. You're not at all sticking it to the powerful. You're hurting the people who live in Minneapolis and have their buildings burnt down and all those things. So the reason I wanted to put it at the end is because the important part of this segment that I'm doing is about Tucker Carlson just being deeply inhuman in his discussion about this. But to be fair to the segment that they're trying to do, of course, we should all be united around the fact that we don't want to harm people's communities, damaged, burned down, to the point where Fox News can come in and do a segment over a year later, almost 2, about the damage that is still done to the city of Minneapolis because of that. And I think you can send a much louder and more profound message when you stray away from that. Of course, oftentimes peaceful protesters are doing their thing, and then others take advantage of that moment who don't even represent the movement. So I understand that as well. But that's kind of my feeling generally on kind of when protests turn into riots and turn into hurting businesses and the community that they're rioting in. So anyways, bottom line, horrible view expressed by Tucker Carlson in this clip. And it's pretty inconceivable that the largest cable news host feels comfortable saying that on national television.